You're listening to another episode of Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. This is the place where you're entitled to Brad's opinion. And now for your host, Brad Allard.
Well, hello. How's it going, everybody? Today, I want to talk about educational alternatives. I'll probably have to do a two-part show on this. Oh, turn down the phone. See, I keep doing that.
Hey,
But
your
yeah,
audio.
I know it. I know. I keep thinking, but I was going to talk about educational alternatives. And if you have commentary, certainly bring it to us. I don't know if I'll be able to get to all the various stuff. So that's why I entitled this part one. I'm going to talk about the difference between public and private today, and then also I'm going to talk about public and charter schools and homeschooling and things of that nature, the advantages and disadvantages of both. But Yeah, so I'm going to talk about all these things. And if I don't get through all the material, then I'll just finish it tomorrow. I don't want to rush through it and swamp everybody with information. Now, as far as my own background, most of y'all know what it is. I taught at Burleson High School for 28 years, and then I taught for 3 years at Southwest Christian, and I teach now at Dallas Baptist. I get a lot of students from these various backgrounds, from public, private, and a significant number of homeschool students. Also, I also teach at Hill. And I've taught at Hill since 2004 at night. And then, of course, the dual enrollment classes at BHS. I see Ben Nichols watching. I know he has strong opinions on this and every other thing. So we'll see what he has to say if we get to it. But here's the thing is that I'm not here to tell you what to do about it. I'm not here to tell you, well, you need to be putting your kids in this type of format, because your kids are your kids, for one thing. Second of all, I think that not one size fits all. And so what may be suitable for most may not be suitable for you, or that kind of thing. So I'm not here to say you need to put your kids in this type of school, but I am going to try to look at it as objectively as possible on the various ups and downs of the various types of options you have out there. And the four basic options that I'm looking at are public, private, charter, and homeschooling. And like I said, if I don't get through all this material, then I'll finish it tomorrow. Um, some of my teaching colleagues may not agree with this, and that's fine. I've had really lots of good conversations with some of my current and former teaching colleagues that don't agree with me about everything about public schools in particular. I should say from the outset, I am a much more of a proponent of vouchers and school choice, but it's not quite as black and white as that might sound to you. I do support more options for parents amongst schools. And I do have concerns about the monopoly that public education seems to exert over certain places and over certain classes of our citizens. Okay, I want to make sure we understand that. Public schools have a lot to offer, and it's a positive overall, but they do exercise for many people the only option they have. And that's a monopoly I don't think should be limited to those who have the wherewithal or the opportunities to choose alternatives. And I'll get to that as I get to that. But before we get to that, let's talk about our sponsors, because that's what makes all this possible. Thank you to CrossFit Burleson at 317 Southwest Wilshire. Check out CrossFitBurleson.com for the website and for membership plans and for workout regimen and the other things they have to offer, the training, etc. It's a good time to work off some of the holiday weight and the winter weight that we have. So check out CrossFit Burleson, and thank you, Daniel, for your continued sponsorship. Thank you, Shandy, for yours. Shandy is very busy these days. I text her and just to see what's going on, so I know what to say about her and whatnot. What she wants said on the podcast, and she's busy, and that's a good sign. It tells you that people use her. It tells you that people trust her. So turning transactions into relationships is more than just a motto, or a logo. It's the truth. So thank you, Shandy, for all you do. And happy birthday to you, Hadley. I don't know if you'll hear this anytime soon, but it's her daughter's birthday, and she's a wonderful young lady, very sweet. But talk to Shandy if you're looking to move in and around the Burleson area. Also, thank you to Rex Russell, the Russell Wealth Group, myfinancialbox.com. Hit the link, get to see his introductory video, get to know him. He's very personable, very, very experienced. And with the market going up and down, I'm sure that you want to have somebody that's been through this more than once to help you through this. So if you have a 401k, IRA, EIEIO, whatever, he can handle it for you. So talk to Rex and hit the financialbox.com link. Also, thank you to Kimmy at Optavia, 817-789-1622. I'll see you Wednesday. And her weight plan has been universally praised. I mean, I before somebody sponsors with me, I do like to check out what I'm about to push as something I can promote, and the reviews on Optavia are very strong. Lots of testimonials about how they've lost weight and kept it off using their program. So I'm very pleased to have her on board. 817-789-1622. Give Kimmy a call and give Gayla a call. It's Valentine's a week from today. And we're at Southern Gym. She can help you out with either new jewelry or repair the old or evaluate and appraise what you have, whatnot. It's a full jewelry service center, full jeweler. She's over on the third floor of the Windmiller building on Hidden Creek. Another very sweet woman. So if you want to impress your loved one, then you could do it over at Southern Gym. She can help you with that. Okay, now let's talk about schools. Okay. I am, for the most part, an advocate of public schools. Okay, but I'm not gonna tell you that they're the only alternative, and most of my peers wouldn't tell you that either. I am an advocate for public schools for the most part, but I do recognize some of the shortcomings of the public school system. That being said, I wrote down a list. Here it is in my hand here. I'm waving around for those who watch it on camera. The positives and negatives of all the various alternatives for education. Um, and they all have them. And sometimes when we're involved in one kind of educational format, we think of the others as they have to be better than what I'm in right now, and that's not really the truth. Every one of these formats have issues, and every one of these formats, the 4 basic formats, have positives. And a lot of it depends on your situation and your financial situation in particular, and where you live, and what kind of administration you have, and what kind of teachers you have, and what kind of format you have, and on and on and on. So that's why I say one size doesn't fit all, and that's why I say I'm not here to tell you you need to be in this. But let's talk about the positives and negatives of public school. I did a lot of that Thursday. The positives primarily is in most public high schools they have more to offer in terms of varied curriculum. Okay, and most of your private schools, except for the very elite or very expensive ones, don't have the kind of offerings that a public school has. I look at BHS and Centennial, and you look at Centennial in particular, and they got not just the cuisine and the chefs, but also the firefighting academy, and they have computer technology, and they have at BHS they have ag related, and they have work skills, and that's to me a very underrated educational area in our state and our country is those kind of vocational skills that it seems like only a few of the districts can really legitimately provide is those type of skills like HVAC or uh, carpentry and things of that nature, things that people who aren't really academically inclined can make a living with. That's I guess that's a kind of a mixed bag. None of the private schools or any other options that have that kind of vocational skills. So that is a advantage that some public schools have or vocational skills, but they do offer more. They offer more in AP. They offer probably more in terms of specialized education for special ed or learning disabled and all this. It obviously is less expensive. I mean, you do have your taxes, and for Burleson, school taxes are not cheap at all. But on the other hand, if you're sending your kid to an alternative format, you're still paying those taxes. So it's not that's not a savings there. And normally speaking, the funding issue isn't quite as acute as you might see in several other opportunities. Now, that being said, where do we get to the downside of public schools? Well, they're numerous. I mean, we know that. I've talked about it before. You've experienced it either as a parent or as a student. Uh, I talked about this Thursday in some detail. So I invite you to go back to Teacher Burnout podcast. It's on Apple and Spotify right now, or on YouTube. And I invite you to look at that because I said a lot of this then too. But the overcrowded classes is by far one of the biggest detriments of public schools. Uh, it's very, very difficult to achieve the kind of educational quality when you have 30 to 32 to 34 students. And like I mentioned before, there's like 4 or 5 different subgroups within it, from English deficient to special ed needs to learning disabled needs to emotional needs to the type of students that are bored because they really belong in an AP type or a tag talented and gifted type class, but they choose for whatever reason not to be in it. And so they're done with their assignment in 3 minutes and everybody else is struggling through it and they get bored. Um, Also, you have the general education population, which is basically anybody that didn't qualify for the other ones. And then you have, of course, a lot of variation in the class structure in terms of what kind of you have the valedictorian sometimes sitting right next to somebody who's barely going to graduate, and how are you going to achieve any kind of educational equilibrium between those two is very, very difficult. And when I talk to parents who have opted out of the public school system, this is one of the biggest reasons they say they got out of it is because of the overcrowded classes. Okay, they got out of it because they said my child does not get the attention he or she needs. My child is very bright, or my child has reading disabilities, or my child is very anxious about being in large crowds, on and on and on. And so they chose alternatives because of, in many cases, the classes are just too big. And my problem also with the way the schools are funded is people that are outside the system will look at it and they'll say that, well, we're spending all this money on schools, yet we're not seeing the results, or why are we still having overcrowded classes? In Texas, in particular, we have not raised the per student expenditure from the state since 2007. It's $6,160 per kid. And the only reason Burleson or other districts are getting more money is because they're having more kids, not because the schools are increasing dramatically. Or rather, the state. I'm sorry, the state is dramatically increasing the amount of money that they get per student. Now they do have grants and they do have special ways of getting money, and you can apply for grants for special ed or math tutorials or STAR test remediation and all this other stuff. But it's a big, long, cumbersome process to get grants. It isn't like you go on the website, click a few buttons, hit submit, and wait for the check. It doesn't work that way at all. If you want to submit for a grant from the state of Texas or from the federal government, it's a months long process with a lot of hoops to clear and a lot of commas and semicolons you better have in the right place. It's very tedious to get grants many times, and they don't last forever. Grants, by definition, are only usually at most a 3-year commitment by the issuer of the grant, either the state or the national government. So you have to reapply all the time. Or if you don't reapply and you want to continue the program, you have to pick up the tab yourself. In other words, when BISD applies for a grant from the state of Texas, they get, say, $50,000 for special ed education. 3 years from now, they have to make a decision. Do we continue this program out of our own pocket, or do we cut the program? And almost always we have to continue the program because kids have been adapted to it, and if it's shown any success at all. Can they reapply for grants? Sometimes, sometimes not. It depends on who's in charge of the state or the federal government's education policy at that time. All right. So that's to me is one of the biggest reasons why when I talk to parents who do not choose public schools, they'll, among other things, almost the first thing they'll say is overcrowded classrooms. Second is the discipline issues. Okay. Where do I go with this? I'll put it this way. Particularly under the Obama and the Biden administrations, they have made it very difficult to issue discipline in the high schools because what they have said is even if your discipline policies are written in a race neutral fashion, if they predominantly fall upon one subset population, race in this case, then it by definition is a civil rights violation. And so what happens is you have schools that, in order to avoid civil rights investigations being brought on by the federal government, you have to uh, kind of apportion out your discipline based on a racial quota basis. And that's exactly what happens. It may sound they may tell you different, but that they're lying to you at the federal government level when they say that's not the point. The point is that if you have a racial policy, or I'm sorry, say it again, a discipline policy that falls primarily on one racial group, even if it was written without any regard to race, it's still going to be considered a violation. And so what'll happen is in the schools on a practical level, they will proportion out who gets disciplined based on their demographics. So if you have demographics of a certain type, your discipline issues cannot exceed those demographics. If you have one group that's seemingly getting more discipline than another, even if it's violating the code, then you're going to be in violation of federal edict. Now, when Trump came in, he did away with that, but Biden has brought it back. This started in 2013, and I saw it firsthand where we would send kids to the office, and some kids maybe were sent to ISS or got D-Hall, and some kids basically were given a stern warning and sent back. And a lot of that, I'm sorry to say, was based on the demographic of that child, because you could not have situations that exceeded our demographic base. And that to me is one of the worst things Obama's educational policy ever did, was basically make discipline issues subject to civil rights scrutiny and to quotas, basically. And so we had unfair application of discipline. And very quickly the kids figured this out. The kids are a lot smarter about knowing the ins and outs of these kind of things than we give them credit for. They knew it right away when they saw what was happening. And so this lack of accountability it was another reason why a lot of parents leave the public school system. To me, I'm trying to be as objective as I can, but to me, that Obama and slash Biden policy really damaged the schools quite a bit, because it basically told kids that it isn't what you do that gets you in trouble; it's who you are, and how much you can get away with. And it really undermined discipline. I saw it very clearly from the last 3 or 4 years of my tenure at BHS. I saw it just decrease dramatically, and I knew teachers and a couple of administrators that left BISD over that, because they said, "I can't do my job anymore, because these kids know that if I send them to the office, nothing's gonna happen to them." What happened, to be clear, is that because of the scrutiny that would be placed upon our, discipline, they basically just dropped a lot of the discipline. And for a kid to be placed in suspension, either on campus or off campus, you had better have committed a felony caught on film, and even then, there was conversation. I mean, it got to the point where the teachers have quit. They quit trying to send kids to the office because they'd come back smirking, knowing they got their hand slapped at best, and they did nothing happen to them. I remember one of my teacher friends basically quit that day when she sent somebody out of the room for cussing at her. I mean, giving her a dog cussing, and he came back 20 minutes later with the vice principal in tow saying, "Well, you gotta let him back in," and she just picked up her purse and left. And she was gone for about a week. And so this is the kind of stuff that the parents will talk about, is a lack of discipline and the lack of academic accountability. Almost no one not graduates. The only people that don't graduate are those who just say, "I am dropping out." Here's the nasty secret about dropouts. I feel like I'm telling all these secrets of the educational system, kind of like, like some sort of expose, but this is the truth. The dropout rate on most schools is going to be less than 5%. But what we call dropout, you basically you're going to have to be, like that Michael Scott scene in The Office where he declares bankruptcy. You have to walk in and say, "I am dropping out and I'm not going back to school." I mean, there's so many other boxes they could check. They say, "Are you gonna go to homeschool?" "Yes." "Okay, we'll check that box." "You gonna go this?" "Check that box." On and on and on. And so basically, the true number of students that don't get a high school diploma is much larger than the dropout rate. It's about 10 times that. The dropout rate of most Texas high schools is 1, 2, 3% because of the narrow definition of what a dropout is. But those who leave our institution without a diploma is much greater. In every Texas high school, the freshman class is much bigger than the senior class. Where did those kids go? Some went to private, some went to home, some went to alternative, some disappeared into the ether. And there you are. And so you have that going on in the public school system. And a lot of my friends that don't use public schools. They say this to me somewhat embarrassed, because a lot of my friends I taught, or I taught their kids, or and their grandkids are the ones we're talking about, because I'm at that age now. But I've taught a lot of these younger parents in their 30s, some in their 40s, some in their late 20s, and they're sending their kids to private schools. Then and they look at me and they say, "Well, we're kind of sorry about that." Now, here's another full disclosure. When my children were young, I sent them to Holy Cross here in town. Why? Not because of the things I'm talking about now. At the elementary level, this isn't quite the issue. I mean, I know you have certain discipline issues and you have certain other academic issues, but the elementary level of Burleson is very strong. The reason we chose Holy Cross is because we wanted the children to grow up with a spiritual content, so a Christian background, and that's a big driver for some that want to have private school. And I understand that, but we never intended for them to go private school all the way through. We wanted them to have a foundation and then move them into the public schools, which we did. And both my kids did pretty well at it. My son is doing well. My daughter is doing well. And another issue that is affecting a lot of people's decision about public schools is the overt political agenda that's going on, particularly in many of the Midwest and northeastern states, where not just critical race theory, but all sorts of types of indoctrination that they're not comfortable with. Okay, and schools have been used to further political agendas, really from both sides, but primarily from the left, I have to say. Now I could probably think of some examples if I thought about it a few minutes about the right using schools as a place to have a public agenda or political agenda. But uh, to me, it's the left that seems to have it more with the critical race theory now, and also with maybe climate issues, also with issues about lifestyle and whatnot. I know that even in Texas, conservative-based students feel reluctant to express their opinion because the curriculum and the orthodoxy in a lot of schools in this state intimidate students from having those points of view. Now, I will say that BHS and Burleson High and Centennial High is not particularly bad in this area. Most of the teachers I knew, they may have had opinions, but they didn't enforce them on their students. And one of my best friends that taught school, she's still there, is much more liberal than I, but you could say something conservative and she's not going to abuse you. She was going to, treat you with respect. She was going to, engage you in the conversation. I had several liberal students who would say the same about me. I like to think that anyway. I mean, they've said that to me, but I like to think it's commonly understood. But you don't get that in a lot of schools. Not in every school is like that. There's a lot of schools across the country that see themselves as putting agencies to put forward certain types of thinking, certain types of political agendas, things of that nature. They don't see it strictly as an educational function. They see it as we're trying to shape and develop certain responses and attitudes in our students that they'll carry into adulthood. So when you get down to it, public schools have a lot to offer. But if you want the thing about it, if you want that school to fulfill its promise to you, as a parent, you're gonna have to be a lot more involved than most parents are. I remember even in, like, open house and these other things, I'd have a lot of free time on my hands, and I was supposedly teaching some of the best students in Burleson High School, and I was, but that didn't mean they had great attendance at open house. And then I look at my peers with the more general ed classes, and, they'd have, like, 2 or 3 or 4 visitors, and that's about it. Furthermore, I'm not advocating at all you go to the school board meetings and heckle them like you see on some of the news. No, I'm not advocating that whatsoever, but I do advise that if you wanna know what's going on, go to the school board meetings and ask legitimate questions. You as a parent have the right to see the curriculum. In the state of Texas, at least at the collegiate level, I am required to put my syllabus online for my students, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. And I know in my days at BHS that we were required to give a syllabus to the parents, either as a written copy or later as an online copy, and I had no problem with that either. Not a lick. A lot of school districts out of state, not so much in Texas, but other states, fight against that. They say they don't want parents imposing themselves on the curriculum. And I didn't want a parent walking in my room and tell me what to teach. But on the other hand, um, I don't I wanted my parents to understand what was being taught in the school. And if they had a question or a concern, I wanted them to contact me. And that didn't happen particularly often. Very rarely, actually, because I don't think I push forward a very radical agenda. But if I every now and then I'd have a parent text me, so what is the point of this reading? And I'd say, here it is. And quite often they'd say, well, thank you for explaining that to me. And that'd be the end of the conversation. I know that this happened in the English department some. Where they said, "Why are we reading this book? There's parts of the book that I'm uncomfortable with," and the English teachers would explain why they consider it to be useful, and most of the time, parents accept that. I very much strongly advocate for the parent to be involved in the situation of their child's education and for their district. I'm not like that ex-governor, fortunately, ex-governor of Virginia, Terry McAuliffe, who said parents have no business telling teachers what to teach. There's a lot of difference between telling me what to teach and wanting to know why I'm teaching it. There's a big difference. I have no problem having a parent say, why are you having my child read this or study this? What's the point behind it? Explain it to me. That's your right. That's what you have as a parent available to you. What I would not want to happen is I want you to teach X. I want you to have them read this. That happened maybe 2 or 3 times in my 28 years. I said, "I want you to have them read this," and I'd say, "Forget it. I'm the teacher of the classroom." But I had times with kids would or not kids, the parents would say, "Why is my kid reading this?" And I'd say, "Because this, and this, and this is the benefit I'm hoping they'll get from it, and the understanding I'm hoping they'll get from it." And usually, almost always, they'd say, "That makes sense. Thank you for your time." So parents, you have the right to be involved in your kid's education. I don't care what some of the left say. Again, there's a big difference in telling me what to teach and asking me why I'm teaching it. Okay. So let's go to the second round of commercials, and then we'll talk about private schools and some of the issues that are good and bad about that. Uh, Thank you to Otto at Our Place. I'll be seeing you later this week, as always. Our Place on the highway in Alsbury. It's been there since 1986. Otto is Mr. Burleson. I mean, he is, a very beloved figure here for good reasons. Very generous, great service, great atmosphere, great food. So that'd be my highest recommendation to go see him and Our Place because it's a great place to go get lunch and or breakfast. Also, thank you to Chris over at the Wild Cigar and Culture. I know they have a big Super Bowl party going on this Sunday, so if you want to go there and have a smoke and a drink and visit with people and watch the Super Bowl, it's going to be right there. Also, Valentine's coming up, so buy some cigars for your true love, be it male or female, and you go buy some cigars, go buy a box, buy a handful, whatever. Over the humidor, the humidor is huge. It's the biggest humidor I've ever been in, and I've been in a couple of them. So it has a lot of variety. So go and check out the humidor there, and or buy a gift card if you don't know what your true love smokes, but you know he likes a cigar. Then go buy a gift card, and you can spend it together over at Wild and have a smoke and a cigar and a decent drink. Also, thank you to Antonio Basallo over at Proactive Payment Solutions. Check out proactivepaymentsolution.com, and they'll help you with your point of sales operations so you can save a little money and save a little time and save a little grief. Okay, they have all these various types of programs they can hook you up with, and so you'll get one that's right for you and save you the most money and save you the most time. So call Antonio over at proactivepaymentsolution.com, and they'll set you up. Either get you the new system or get you the best system. So there you are. And thank you to Payne Beagles over at Beagles Technology Solutions. Hit the link there at www.beaglestech.com or call at 817-944-3572, and they'll make your home a smart home. He'll help you with the buying. He'll help you with the programming. He'll help you with the coordination of your various computer apparatuses. I don't know what their proper plural is, but anyway, it'll help you get your home into a smart home. It'll hook it up with your phone with an app so you can check on things going on at the house. Is the dishwasher running? Is the air conditioner running? Things like that. He can do it all. So call Payne Beagles over at 817-944-3572. Also, you should have in your boxes by now, Local Life magazine. We'll have Tiffany on later this month. or if you haven't gotten it yet, you should get it today because it goes out at the first week of the month. LocalLifeTX.com is up, and so you can check out that for various other coupons, sales, specials, whatever. LocalLifeTX.com, or get the magazine. And you should be advertising in that if you want to reach 30,000 homes and over 110,000 people. And lastly, Burleson Radio, playing your hits right now. Your voice, your station on Live 365. We'll be having some special music this week and on Valentine's weekend. So there you are, Burleson Radio, Live 365. Your voice, your station. Okay, where am I, Taylor? Talk about private schools, right?
Yes, sir.
You went to private schools, right?
I did.
I'm not going to drag you into this because I don't, it's just, you're entitled to my opinion, not Taylor's opinion.
It's your opinion.
It's my opinion. You seem to do okay with private schools, haven't you?
Yeah, it was a fun experience.
What was the primary driver of your parents deciding private schools? Did they ever tell you?
I think, like you said before, like a Christian foundation, because there were
Right.
always Christian schools that I went to, and then just trying to find the best education for me. So
And see, and I don't have a real problem with that at all. I mean, like I said, I sent my kids to Holy Cross until at the time they were much smaller in terms of numbers and what they offered as K through 5, I believe was at the time was as far as it went. And I'm a proponent then, a proponent now of Holy Cross, but I knew there'd be a time that my kids would transition to public schools, and they did.
right,
But they were, I wanted them to have a foundation of faith and whatnot. Now, I didn't want that to be at the expense of a good education. All right, I'm not an advocate of sending kids to a school, private school, because it's church based or Christian based. If the education isn't any good, I wasn't willing to make that kind of trade off. But fortunately, there are a lot of schools where you don't have to make the trade off. So, what's the benefits of private school versus public? Well, the biggest benefit I saw in my 3 years at Southwest Christian was smaller classes. The biggest class I had was 20. And I remember when they had 20 and the counselor comes in with this sheepish look on his face, like, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to put 20 in your second period. And I know it's overcrowded. And I just started laughing. I really did. I started laughing because, why? Because 20 would have been wonderful in my public school experience, but they thought they were overloading me. Most of my school classes, at private school classes, the low teens, anywhere from a 12 to 14. I had a couple of classes that'd be like 8, and some, like I mentioned, about 20, and that's about it. And because of the smaller class size, I was able to focus more on the students. Now, we need to get rid of this idea about private schools also being strictly for the elite, because a lot of the private school kids I had, they had the wherewithal to get it there somewhere in their family, either grandma, grandpa, or their parents, or some other, or maybe in a couple of cases, I know one of the parents is working 2 jobs to pay the tuition and that kind of thing because they wanted the experience for their kid. But so I had a lot of students, had a lot of wherewithal, a lot of students who came from very high dollar backgrounds, but I also had students that are more middle class, if you will, at Southwest Christian. But the smaller classes did help because I was able to focus on that. And the idea that some of their parents put them in these small private schools is because of the small classes, and they knew their kid had either a dyslexia or some other learning disability or anxiety issues or whatever else. And so by putting them in an environment without quite the stress of large classes, crowded halls, crowded lunchrooms, they could function better. So that was the biggest asset of the private school that I saw was smaller classes, and the discipline tended to be better. They didn't have to worry about all the stuff I described in the first half of the show with civil rights issues because they weren't federally funded. But from what I saw, the students were a bit more self-disciplined. You'd have fewer absentee parents, even though that had happened. Now, again, I want to stress this point. If you haven't ever been involved in a private school setting and you think all these kids are little darlings lined up to learn and boy, they get their homework done in time and all this stuff, there's some students in there that were put in there for rehabilitation purposes by their parents. They got in trouble in the other school, the public school, and we would get 2 or 3 of the kids got booted out of Fort Worth, and they'd come to ours because their grandparents had money, and hopefully to try to straighten them up. and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. I had situations in my 3 years at Southwest Christians that were not unfamiliar to me from my public school days. Okay, so the idea that, this is some sort of Shangri-La that you put your kids in there and they all come singing to class and they're all neatly dressed and they're all, "Oh, I wrote an extra page on my 3-page essay because I got so into it." These are teenage kids and they're gonna be like teenage kids, good, bad, and indifferent. Most of my Southwest Christian students are pretty good students because by the time I got them, 'em, they'd been pretty well trained. But let's not I just don't wanna go down this path that it was like some nirvana or Eden-like situation. That a lot of the same things that plagued public schools plague private schools as well, but I will say they have smaller classes, they usually have better discipline. Many of the schools have the spiritual aspect like Holy Cross or what Taylor was talking about, and that's not, to be dismissed at all because you want that kind of foundation, at least I wanted that foundation for my kids, and usually the private school kids do get more attention in all sorts of ways than do the public school kids. And most of these kids come from backgrounds where they have a setup for them to succeed at home. Most of the time, two-parent families, most of the time they have an academic emphasis. Most of the time, particularly at Christian-based schools, a lot of these kids are involved in church, youth groups and whatever else. So what are the downsides of public schools? It sounds great, smaller classes, more attention, probably less rowdy in the hallways. I in the 3 years I was there, I never come close to having to break up a fight. I did see a couple of guys square off, and then that was about it. Not anything like saw and unfortunately, that's becoming more and more of a problem. One of my favorite ex-students was assaulted by she's a counselor at a junior high. She was assaulted by a student, left her with a black eye and cracked ribs. This is about 2 weeks ago. I never saw anything like that at Southwest Christian. The downside of private schools, the expense, of course. You do have expense. None of these schools are cheap, and you're already paying school taxes, but you're still gonna be paying pretty high tuition. And some schools have help and some don't, or have more help than others, but you do get that. Also, you do get entitlement at some of the more elite private schools. I mean, almost every private school I know of has some sort of service project or some sort of thing they do, an outreach, whatever. But you do have a segment of society that is well beyond most of what most people experience. And so they do have a lot of these kids did have entitlement. They weren't used to having demands placed upon them by educators sometimes or on their conduct in class or putting up their phone or showing up on time or doing their work on time, and they would take it very poorly. They were indignant sometimes. And then you get, of course, the most elite private schools, and even at my school, you'd have situations. So, well, what did you do over the holidays? Well, I went to, Disney World. I went to Switzerland. I went, toured Ireland or something like that. And, so they had experiences, lifetime experiences that most of your post school kids don't really deal with that much. Also, the quality is varying. The idea that private school automatically equals better school is not true. Right? I want to make that point. Just because you think it's a private institution, it's going to be a better institution is not true. The high schools and the schools here in Texas, at least for better or for worse, have some sort of accountability they have to meet. The dreaded tests. I don't like the tests. I think it destroys education sometimes, and I got it. But the fact is that you have varying levels of education in private schools. You have some excellent private schools, and particularly in the Fort Worth area, and I could name several of them. And they're not all real big either, but there's several institutions that are pretty good, that are very good. And they are costly, of course, but the point is that just because it's private doesn't make it better. In some ways, it could be less of an education because private schools also don't offer as many variety of courses. Even the best ones are limited in what they can provide, and forget about any kind of vocational or other type of strictly academic. You don't go to private school to learn how to repair computers or whatnot. You go there to quote Shakespeare and get into the big schools. And there's a lot of peer pressure about that too amongst the private school competition. I mean, I'm just thinking about Fort Worth. There is a segment of our society in Fort Worth that basically are part of the private school solar system, if you will, and there's a lot of competition for those kids, and and sometimes it means you stretch the boundaries of what's acceptable just to keep them going or bring them in because there's a limited number of kids that can afford a private education in Fort Worth, and all the schools know it, and so they're in high competition for those kids. And sometimes, despite whatever we like to think, they will bend a few of the rules if it means getting this kid in or keeping him in, because the private schools are very much in competition with each other. I don't have a problem with competition among schools. I really don't, because it makes the schools better. What I do have is when the competition forces compromises to be made in order to accommodate somebody. That's where I don't get it. And it's not immune to politics either. People don't should never think that because it's a private school that they're not going to be dealing with CRT or they're dealing with other type of issues. They got teachers in there that are excessively conservative or excessively liberal, just like any other institution. I know of a couple of Southwest Christians competition, I'd rather not say directly Country Day, that they're known for being fairly liberal in their outlook. That they're known for being, more, accepting of doctrines and theories that you might be uncomfortable with. So the idea that you send them in private school, you're protecting them from all this you're reading about, uh, is is not true in many cases. And on the other hand, you can get into a school that's too protective, and it shelters the kids so much that they're unaware of what's going on in the world around them. They don't understand what's going on, or they don't have any clue what's going on in the world around them because they're not going to be watching the news at home, and they're not going to be involved in educational material that exposes them to unpleasantries, I guess, difficult thoughts maybe. And also, like I mentioned, you have dominant personalities and dominant donors that sometimes drive the bus. That's characteristic. Now, so to kind of I'm getting close to the end of my time here. I really don't want to get into charter and homeschooling. I'll probably do that tomorrow. I really, uh, the best thing I can say about private schools, if you wanted to go to a private school and you had the wherewithal to do it, I would choose a school that if you want to go to a church-based school, fine, it's great, it's wonderful, I endorse it. But I would rather you really need to look at the facilities and the academic curriculum very closely. The primary function of the school needs to be academic. Okay, having it in a Christian-based environment is great, but if that's all you're basing it on, you're taking the risk of a less than good education, okay? And so if you wanted a Christian-based school, I fully endorse that idea, but I reason I could do it to Holy Cross because I saw the curriculum and I knew it to be legitimate. And as far as other schools that were competing with Southwest Christian, I did a research project for them to see what their reading lists were and what their course offerings were, and some offered the bare bones, others offered tremendous opportunities. That's what you should look at. But on the other hand, the downside of private schools is if you're looking to escape the public school system, some of the same issues are gonna be there as well. Peer pressure for drugs and alcohol, that's gonna be there, and they have the wherewithal to get it. Peer pressure to keep up with the status. Situations where uh, you may be subject to educational doctrines that make you uncomfortable and you don't have any recourse. All right. So, all those are things you need to consider. Like I said at the beginning of the show, I'm not going to tell you which one to go for. Since I was in both, I can recommend both. But I can recommend, I think my heart was with public schools. When I look back on my educational career and I think back on it, most of my memories, most of my recollections, most of the things I draw on to talk about these things come from my public school experience. And for better for worse, I think that was more dominant to me than the private school experience, which was a mixed bag, to be frank. For me personally, it was mixed. There were some things about it I liked, some things I was disappointed in. There's some things that occurred that I wish didn't, and some things that I was blessed by. And as far as the teaching quality at Southwest Christian, it was outstanding. Okay, that's at least for that school. That no, I was very impressed when I first joined them. The number of teachers there that had masters, a couple had doctorates, the amount of advanced classes. I thought Southwest Christian was, I didn't know what to expect, to be frank, when I started there, but they had an outstanding staff. So that was that. Now, as far as administration, I'll just better left that unsaid, and I'll leave it at that. And so tomorrow I'm going to finish off this charter school and this homeschooling, see what their advantages and disadvantages. So I invite you for that. Now, also one last thing, and this is totally off the subject, but I was sent by several people some material about what the Republicans said about the January 6th invasion, that being legitimate political discourse. That's going to be Thursday's show. I didn't want to. I invite you for that because it was very disheartening, to say the least. And I'm going to address that issue on Thursday. So I invite you to tune in for that. Unless I do have a guest I've invited, and she's trying to get back to me. If not, I'll postpone it, but I'll postpone the politics. But um, it was a very disheartening thing to read. And I'll be discussing that more fully on Thursday. But today we're going to talk about education, and tomorrow as well. And I hope I made myself clear. I hope I was as objective as possible. I hope I gave you something to think about. I'm not here to try to convince you what you need to be doing or change what you need to be doing. It's your choice, your children, and all it's good. But I'm just giving you something to think about, I hope. So let's run through the sponsors, bud. All right. Thank you, Daniel, CrossFit Burleson. Over at CrossFitBurleson.com. Check out the website for the plans and programs. Also, thank you to Stog Steel Group and Shane Stog Steel. I know she's very busy today, so that's a good sign. If you want to move in and around the Burleson area, she's the one to talk to. And also thank you for the 817life.com page. Also, Rex over at Russell Wealth Group. Check myfinancialbox.com, hit the link, see his video, get to know him, become a client. He'll be glad you did. Thank you to Kimmy Etheridge over at Optavia, 817-789-1622. If you're looking for a lifestyle change, not just a weight loss plan, but a lifestyle change, give her a call, 817-789-1622. Well, in Gala, it's Valentine's, like I said. She'll help you out with Southern Gym. She's a very sweet lady. A lot of our BNI friends, our networking friends, have used her, and they just rave about her. So over on the third floor of the Windmill building, and check out some Valentine stuff. Also, thank you to Our Place Auto, well-known. It's been there since 1986. It's great food, great people, great service, the whole thing. So thank you, Otto, for what you do for this community. Thank you to Chris over at Wild Cigar and Culture. Remember the Super Bowl party this Sunday. Also gift cards for Valentine's for your true beloved. And also cigars, if you want to give you the person in your life that smokes cigars, there you are. So thank you, Chris. Thank you to Proactive Payment Solutions, Antonio Basalo. We're going to have him on pretty soon. We're trying to work out a good time. ProactivePaymentSolution.com. Help you with the point of sales operation, save you some money, save you some time. Also, Paying Beagles can help you with the saving some money and time with the Beagles Technology Solutions. Hit www.beaglestech.com, 817-944-3572, and he'll turn your home into a smart home, make it more efficient, more cost effective. Also, Tiffany, I look forward to you being on the show. You can tell us your big news. LocalFTX.com is the web link. The magazine should be in your mailbox right now for marketing to 30,000 homes and 110,000 people. That's a bunch. She's expanding every month. And Burleson Radio, Live 365, your station, your voice, your station, playing your favorite music right now. So, Taylor, I'll see you tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
And we'll have a great time talking about homeschooling and charter. Did you ever do homeschooling?
No, not really.
Yeah, okay. Well, then who needs you? Anyway, we'll talk
All right,
more.
bye.
Right. We'll see y'all tomorrow, guys.